Okay, so we're there. All right, thank you. All right, good morning again. I am Tom Sherba, the principal investigator of the Ohio Substance Abuse Monitoring Network, known as OSAM. OSAM is Ohio Mental Health and Addiction Services Drug Use Surveillance System. We've been in operation since 1999, so this is our 25th year. I've been the PI of OSAM since 2010. OSAM is the only statewide drug use surveillance system of its kind in the United States. Next slide, please. Okay, the function of OSAM is to report on new and emerging drug trends in Ohio every 6 months. So what makes OSAM unique? Ohio, through the use of OSAM, is the only state that places dedicated epidemiologists and communities to talk with persons with intimate knowledge of substance use. While there are many large administrative data sets that can tell you the number of overdoses or the quantity of drugs seized, OSAM data provides insight into why. We talk with people living with substance use disorder, i.e. persons with lived experience, and community members working to address substance use, such as treatment providers and law enforcement members. We report using the words of respondents to describe what is happening in their communities. Thus, OSAM provides regional data for communities to plan prevention and intervention strategies to address local needs. OSAM provides needed context, reporting that is illustrative of current substance use in Ohio. So to highlight, the benefits of OSAM reporting are identifying real-time drug trends, assist in planning program needs, aids with grant applications, is a resource for publication, media, businesses, and government. Next slide, please. Okay, so the OSAM network consists of 8 regions: Akron, Canton, Athens, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Columbus, Dayton, Toledo, and Youngstown. Each region is assigned an epidemiologist, as I said before, whose function is to continuously collect drug trend data. Every county and every community in Ohio falls within the OSAM network. So in focus groups, we interview between 400 and 500 people from throughout Ohio every 6 months. Next slide, please. All right, these are OSAM's principal study variables: current drug availability, change in drug availability during the past 6 months. That's how we track trends over time. Adulterants, street name, street pricing, routes of administration, typical use profile, and other substances used in combination. And this is where alcohol comes in for us. We don't track alcohol use patterns specifically per se, but we always ask for all the illicit drugs, what's used in combination, and alcohol undoubtedly always comes up. And people talk about how alcohol is used with the various illicit drugs that we report on. In addition to these variables, OSAM collects consumer survey data related to needle use, hepatitis and HIV, naloxone, medication-assisted treatment, and other variables. It's all in the report. Next slide, please. All right, so OSAM tracks these substances: fentanyl, heroin, prescription opioids, buprenorphine, sedative hypnotics, marijuana, methamphetamine, cocaine, and other drugs. Now, other drugs is an important category. This is where we uncover new and emerging illicit drug trends. Today, I will share data specifically related to heroin and fentanyl and methamphetamine. Those 3 drugs are, well, fentanyl and methamphetamine have been tracking high for quite some time. Next slide, please. All right, so the data for today's presentation is from OSAM's most recent drug trend report. From January to June 2023, we interviewed 411 people from throughout Ohio. That's 323 persons with SUD, 43 treatment providers, and 45 members of law enforcement. So in addition to our primary data collection, we also triangulate with secondary data. Our data was compared with secondary data from numerous state, county, and local partners, such as coroner and medical examiners' offices, police and county crime labs, and other state agencies, such as Department of Public Health and Bureau of Criminal Investigation, Ohio BCI. Lastly, Ohio media outlets in each OSAM region were queried for information regarding illicit substance use. So we use all these data points to help us most accurately describe what's happening in Ohio communities. Next slide, please. All right, this table provides a demographic overview of the 323 consumers from the January to June data collection cycle, with consumer demographics in that far right column compared to Ohio statistics from the U.S. Census. As you can see, our sample resembled Ohio's population somewhat well. However, there was a higher proportion of OSAM consumers who reported African-American race. We oversampled African-American a bit there. Also, education and median household income were lower among our consumers, and poverty was higher. Next slide, please. All right, so we do survey and collect data on a whole host of variables. Here are some additional consumer characteristics. Note, 70% of consumers reported ever having a mental health diagnosis. 28% reported current receipt of MAT. And then the top 3 drugs reported as used during the past 6 months were alcohol, marijuana, and methamphetamine. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so heroin. Throughout most OSAM regions, there was no respondent consensus as to current availability of heroin, as you can see in that second column there from the left. Those reporting high current availability most often conflated heroin with fentanyl, while those reporting low current availability recognized fentanyl as dominating the opioid market and having supplanted heroin. Next, please. Okay, so here's fentanyl availability. Fentanyl is highly available throughout OSAM regions and has been for some time now. Universally, respondents noted continued high supply and demand for the drug. They discussed that fentanyl has become a drug of choice due to its widespread availability, low cost, and high potency. And this has changed over time. Initially, fentanyl entered the drug supply as an adulterant for other drugs. Now, fentanyl has become a drug of choice for many. Many consumers have migrated to fentanyl for the long and no longer seek heroin. Comments included, and this is where we bring in the words to the respondents. Heroin has kind of faded out, fallen in demand. Fentanyl is so much cheaper than heroin. Why pay for heroin? Once you mess with fentanyl, heroin doesn't touch you anymore, meaning fentanyl is much more potent and raises your opioid tolerance so that heroin does not have the same desired effect as previously. Consumer demand for heroin has gone down. Fentanyl is definitely the thing that people are most seeking. Next slide, please. Okay, so other data sources indicated heroin fentanyl is available throughout OSAM regions. Here are a couple of tables. They're examples of regional summary data, of secondary data. Now, Millennial Health is a great partner of ours. They reported that 0.2% of heroin and 5.9% of fentanyl urinalysis specimens submitted for testing. Of the urinalysis specimens, submitted for testing, 0.2% and 5.9% respectively were positive. These data correspond to OSAM respondent data indicating that fentanyl is more available than heroin. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so crime labs. We solicit data from crime labs. Crime labs throughout OSAM regions indicated many cutting agents found in heroin, as displayed in the table there. Consumers universally reported fentanyl as a top cutting agent, and they most often reported the current overall quality of heroin as low. However, heroin reported quality ratings vary depending on one's perspective and preference for fentanyl. For instance, some consumers viewed the lethality of fentanyl-cut heroin as indicative of high quality, right? So people are dying from it. It must be really potent and really, really good. Recognizing the high potency of fentanyl that they desire, while some consumers view the addition of fentanyl to heroin as indicative of low quality heroin, attempts by the dealer to mask poor quality or the absence of heroin. So a member of law enforcement in Cleveland region explained, I guess it's how you look at it. Somebody in the outside looking in may be like, this person overdosed because they got a bad batch of heroin adulterated with fentanyl. Whereas some people would say it's actually not a bad batch. It's a good batch because they're looking for that potency. Consumers most often rated the overall quality of fentanyl as high. Consumers reported the top cutting agent for fentanyl is powdered sugar, followed by mannitol. Now, crime labs did not report cutting agents for fentanyl. Analysis, oh, next slide, please, or next, yeah, okay, there we go. Here we get into some demographic data. Analysis of demographic data from GPRA. GPRA is the Government Performance and Results Act, which is a self-administered behavioral health data collected from persons entering publicly funded SUD treatment programs. Okay, so we found that of all intake clients that indicated heroin use during the past 30 days, 49.6% was male, 63.2% was under the age of 40 years, and 91.1% indicated white as their race. GPRA does not ask about fentanyl use. All right, next slide, please. Well, just to go back, the importance of the GPRA data is that when we ask our respondents to describe the typical use profile, this is a typical variable for most folks. Common responses were drugs don't discriminate, anybody, anyone, everybody, everyone. That's why we look for these secondary data sources to kind of help us come up with a profile of use. Respondents cited the high prevalence of fentanyl and its widespread use as an adulterant for almost all drugs as making everyone who uses drugs susceptible to becoming dependent on it. Thus, the everyone, drugs don't discriminate. I think I Yeah, here we are. Okay. So we also asked what drugs are used in combinations. Consumers continue to report heroin, fentanyl are most often used in combination with crack and powder cocaine and methamphetamine. And that's to regulate their high, to avoid opioid overdose, and to speedball. Speedball, of course, is the concurrent or consecutive stimulant depressant high, which is becoming more and more popular. A consumer shared, heroin is a downer. Ice crystal methamphetamine will get you back up if you're overdosing. I've seen people come off or reverse an overdose with a shot of ice. It keeps your heart going. Other drugs that prolong and intensify the high of heroin, fentanyl, and help alleviate opiate withdrawal symptoms are alcohol, marijuana, MDMA, which is ecstasy, Molly, prescription opioids, prescription stimulants, and sedative hypnotics. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, then methamphetamine has been trending high for some time now. Remains highly available throughout OSAM regions. Respondents continue to attribute high availability to supply and demand. Reportedly, drug dealers are pushing methamphetamine because the drug is highly profitable, and consumers are wanting methamphetamine for its low cost and long-lasting high. Consumers noted, these are quotes, methamphetamine is highly addictive and it gives you a longer high than most drugs. Methamphetamine is cheap and stronger than most drugs. There's a high profit margin to selling methamphetamine. So there are a lot of people selling it. People are pushing it everywhere. I've never seen a hard drug where it's that available and that cheap. Throughout OSAM regions, respondents continue to identify imported crystal methamphetamine as most prevalent. So we're not seeing the shake and bake, the home manufactured methamphetamine as much as we used to in the past. Next slide, please. Okay, so other data sources indicated methamphetamine as available throughout OSAM regions. Here's Millennial Health again, reporting that 5.7% of urinalysis specimens submitted for methamphetamine testing during the past 6 months was positive for methamphetamine. Next. Another secondary data source, GIPRA, collected from persons entering, again, publicly funded SUD treatment programs, found that during the past 6 months, 16.1% reported methamphetamine use 30 days prior to intake. And you can see the variable among the regions here. And our regional data, of course, is very helpful for community planning. Next slide, please. So again, crime labs are reporting on cutting agents. Here's a list of what is found in methamphetamine specimens. So consumers in all of our 8 OSAM regions noted fentanyl as the top cutting agent for the drug, which is sad because we have tracked the people are moving from opioids to methamphetamine, believing they're taking a harm reduction approach, eliminating or greatly reducing the risk for overdose, but in fact, fentanyl seems to be in a lot of the methamphetamine out there. The consumer said, definitely fentanyl, but I think it's in everything though. I took meth and nodded out, passed out, overdose, and that shouldn't happen. I've tested a lot of meth for fentanyl using the fentanyl testing strips. There's more fentanyl in meth than previously. A lot of it is cut with fentanyl. It's harder to find just meth. Other top cutting agents reported included MDMA and MSM, a joint supplement. Consumers throughout OSAM regions most often rated the current overall quality of methamphetamine as moderate. However, the consensus was that, like most illicit drugs, quality varies. Consumers described the quality of methamphetamine as it's good, it's not good, depends on who you're going to. Next, please. Okay, so who's using methamphetamine? So analysis of GIPR data shows that of those who indicated methamphetamine use during the past 30 days, found that of those who endorsed methamphetamine, 55.6% was male, 61.7% was under the age of 40, and 92% indicated white as their race. A profile of typical methamphetamine use did not emerge from our focus group data. Throughout OSAM regions, respondents most often report that anyone could use the drug again, especially since it's widely available. However, common descriptors of methamphetamine use mentioned included lower socioeconomic status, white people aged 20s to 40s, heroin and fentanyl use, the gay community, manual laborers, for example, factory workers, and people who work long or late hours, such as long-haul truck drivers, bartenders, third shift workers, and sex workers. Next, please. Okay, so substances used in combination with methamphetamine are many, particularly depressant drugs such as alcohol, heroin, fentanyl, marijuana, and sedative hypnotics. These drugs aid in coming down from the extreme stimulant high of methamphetamine, and or they are combined with meth for speedballing. Crack and powder cocaine and prescription stimulants are used to potentiate and prolong the effects of methamphetamine. Okay, next, please. Okay, so this table presents other drugs discussed by OSAM region. Again, this other drug section is important as this is where we uncover new and emerging illicit drug trends. Note, no mention or discussion of a drug does not indicate the absence of the drug in the region. Okay, next, please. All right, so this is the xylazine osamogram. Xylazine, as many of you probably know, is a non-opioid tranquilizer that the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has approved for use by veterinarians to sedate large animals, but it is a new and emerging drug used to adulterate illicit drugs such as heroin and fentanyl. So osamograms are one-page summaries, and this is our most recent one of report key findings that highlight drug trends. Since January 2023, OSAM respondents have increasingly reported concern over xylazine. The graph there represents coroner and medical examiner data shared with OSAM, showing an increase in xylazine-related deaths. So we will continue to track and report on xylazine as well. Next, please. This is the cover page of OSAM's most recent drug trend report of June 2023. Drug trend reports are published twice yearly in January and June. All of our reports, including osamograms, are available for download via Ohio MASA's website. The web link to OSAM's homepage is highlighted there in yellow at the bottom of the slide. Next, please. Okay, so how to collaborate with OSAM. You can sign up for OSAM publication announcements through email. You can participate in a focus group or interview. Share secondary data to assist with data triangulation. Forward OSAM publications to colleagues and others concerned with drug use in Ohio. Next, please. Okay, here's the contact information for the OSAM team. If you'd like to sign up for the listserv, please send us an email. Feel free to reach out to us. Okay, next slide. All right, it's been a privilege sharing OSAM data with you today. Are there any questions?